What happens when the man you love, the man you built a life with, steals it all right from under you? For Erin, cloud. Her perfect marriage and beautiful home vanished in a single day, sold by her husband to fund a life with his mistress. He left her with nothing but the clothes on her back and a lawsuit she couldn't afford. He thought he had destroyed her. He thought she was gone. What he didn't know was that you can't destroy a phoenix. You only show her how to rise from the ashes. And this phoenix wasn't just coming back for her house. She was coming back for the entire neighborhood. Life on Magnolia Drive was a carefully curated masterpiece, and Erin Cloud was its chief curator. Her home, a restored 1920s craftsman in the heart of the historic Willow Creek neighborhood, was her canvas. Every wainscoted wall, every reclaimed oak floorboard, every window box overflowing with ivy had been chosen sanded or planted by her. She had given up a promising career in architecture to build this life with Marcus, her charismatic, devastatingly handsome husband, a man who worked in high-stakes wealth management. "You have the real talent, Erin," he'd often say, kissing her temple as he glanced at her designs for the local community center. "I just move numbers around. You create." But lately the numbers were all he seemed to care about. The client dinners stretched past midnight. His phone, once left carelessly on the kitchen counter, was now perpetually in his pocket, screen down. When she'd asked about their joint savings last month, planning a restoration for the neighborhood's old gazebo, he'd been dismissive. "Don't worry your pretty head about it, darling." He'd smiled a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "The market's volatile. I've moved our assets into a more dynamic portfolio. It's all tied up." Erin, trusting him, had let it go. She turned her focus back to the neighborhood committee, to the charity auction she was planning, to the life she was building. The last normal morning began with the scent of coffee and the rustle of the Wall Street Journal. Marcus was dressed in a pristine, custom-tailored suit that cost more than her car. "Big day," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "This new client, Chloe, is demanding. But if I land her, we're talking a massive commission." "Chloe," Erin asked, pouring him a cup. "You've mentioned her a lot. Is she the one you were with at the aviary last week? My friend Sarah thought she saw you." Marcus didn't flinch, but his grip on the coffee mug tightened almost imperceptibly. "Chicago is a small town for people in my line of work. Yes, that was probably her. All business, I assure you. She's intense." He kissed Erin's cheek, a dry, papery gesture. "I'll be late. Don't wait up." He left. Erin spent the day finalizing blueprints for the annual Willow Creek Preservation Fair. She felt a nagging unease, a cold pebble in her stomach. She couldn't explain. She brushed it off as stress. At 4:00 p.m., she drove home from a meeting with the city council. As she turned onto Magnolia Drive, she saw it. A large, garish, sold sign staked into her immaculate front lawn. A cold laugh bubbled in her throat. This had to be a prank, one of Marcus's rich, tasteless friends. But as she pulled into the driveway, she saw a strange car, a cherry-red convertible, parked where her car should be. She walked to the front door, fumbling for her keys. She slid the key into the lock. It didn't turn. She tried again. Jiggled it. Nothing. The lock was new. A cold, sharp panic, bright as magnesium, flared in her chest. She rang the doorbell, her hand trembling. The door swung open. It wasn't Marcus. It was a woman young with sharp features and platinum blonde hair, wrapped in Erin's own silk robe. Erin recognized her from an Instagram photo Marcus had been tagged in Chloe, the intense client. Can I help you? Chloe asked, sipping from one of Erin's antique crystal glasses. What are you doing in my house? Erin stammered. Who are you? Where is Marcus? Chloe's lip curled into a smirk. He's upstairs celebrating, and I'm afraid you're mistaken. She leaned against the door frame, the silk robe falling open slightly. This isn't your house. Not anymore. Marcus! Erin shouted, pushing past the woman. The sheer audacity the violation sent a shock of adrenaline through her. Marcus, what is going on? The house was different. Her antique furniture was pushed against the walls covered in plastic. Boxes were stacked in the hallway. Champagne bottles and 2 used glasses sat on the grand piano. Marcus appeared at the top of the stairs, buttoning his shirt. He froze when he saw Erin, his face a mask of annoyance, not shame. Erin, you're home early. What is she doing here? What is that sign doing on our lawn? Erin's voice was rising, cracking. Why did you change the locks? We need to talk. Marcus said, his voice dropping into a cold, businesslike tone that chilled her to the bone. He means, Chloe said, sauntering into the foyer, that I live here now. Erin looked at Marcus, searching his eyes for the man she married, for the joke, for the mistake. She found nothing, only a cold, hard finality. Marcus, tell her to leave. Now. She can't, Erin, Marcus said, descending the stairs slowly. He didn't look at her, focusing instead on straightening his tie. The house is sold. The title cleared this morning. Sold. What are you talking about? We didn't sell the house. I never signed anything. You did. Marcus said, simply. 3 months ago. Remember that refinancing paperwork I had you sign, the one to lower our mortgage rate? Erin's blood ran cold. She remembered. A thick stack of papers he'd brought to her late at night. Just sign here, here, and here, honey. It's just a formality. She had been tired, trusting. She had signed. That wasn't refinancing, Erin. That was a transfer of deed and a full power of attorney. The words didn't make sense. A power of attorney? Why? To make things easier. Chloe cut in her voice, dripping with venomous satisfaction. So he could liquidate his assets, including this dump, and invest in us. Liquidate? Erin's knees felt weak. She grabbed the banister. Our savings, the joint accounts, are gone. Marcus finished. It was my money, Erin. I made it. You just spent it on doilies and saving dead trees in this pathetic neighborhood. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. This wasn't a sudden affair. This was a plan. A long, cold, calculated execution. You can't do this, Erin whispered, the fight draining out of her, replaced by a hollow dread. I own half of this house. We're married. The law, Marcus said, stepping in front of Chloe, says that your signature on a legally binding document is all that matters. You signed over your rights to the property. I sold it. A private sale. To Chloe. He gestured to the woman. She's the new owner. And as the new owner, she'd like you to leave. Leave? Erin looked around at the walls that held her entire life. I have nowhere to go. My clothes. I've already had your things packed, Chloe said, pointing to 3 black trash bags sitting by the garage door. Just the essentials. The furniture, the art. That was all part of the sale. Erin looked at the trash bags. Her life reduced to 90 gallons of plastic. Get out, Erin, Marcus said, his voice flat. Don't make this messy." "Messy," she repeated, her voice dead. She looked at the man she had loved for 15 years. You've destroyed my life. You stole my home." "A home is just an asset," Marcus said, opening the front door. "And you, my dear, are now a liability I can't afford." He threw the trash bags onto the porch. The rain, which had been threatening all day, began to fall. Cold, hard drops that mixed with the silent tears streaming down Erin's face. She stood on her own porch, locked out, dispossessed and utterly broken, as the door to her life clicked shut in front of her. For 3 days, Erin operated in a fog. Her friend Sarah, her only real confidant, had taken her in. Sarah's tiny one-bedroom apartment in a downtown high-rise felt like a different planet from the sprawling, tree-lined streets of Willow Creek. Erin slept on the couch, staring at the ceiling, the same scene playing over and over in her head. The lock, the smirk, the trash bags. She had $200 to her name, which she'd had in her purse. Her credit cards were declined. Her car, she learned, was in Marcus's name only. He had systematically, meticulously erased her. "You have to fight him," Sarah insisted, pacing the small living room. This is sociopathic, Erin. We'll get a lawyer. We'll sue him into the Stone Age." They met with a legal aid attorney, a young, earnest man named Mr. Davies. He listened patiently, his brow furrowing. The news was not good. "Ms. Cloud, what you've described is fraud in the inducement," he explained. "He tricked you into signing. The problem is proving it. It's your signature on a notarized power of attorney. It's your signature on the deed transfer. He'll claim you were a willing participant. Without a paper trail, without a recording, it's a he said, she said case. And he has all the money, which means he can afford a team of lawyers from a firm like Sullivan and Cromwell to bury us in motions." "So that's it?" Erin asked, her voice hollow. "He just wins. We can file for an emergency injunction to try and freeze his assets, but he's likely already moved them offshore. And since he sold the house to a third party." "His mistress," Erin spat. "His mistress reclaiming the house is almost impossible. We'd have to prove she was a co-conspirator, that she knew the sale was fraudulent. It's a very high bar." Erin left the office feeling more hopeless than before. She was not just broke. She was legally neutered. That evening, as she was listlessly sorting through the meager belongings, Marcus had allowed her some clothes toiletries, a few photo albums. A small wooden box fell out of a sweater. It was her Aunt Isolde's. Her aunt had been the black sheep of the family, a brilliant, eccentric artist who had lived in Paris and never married. She passed away 2 years ago. Erin had been her favorite, and she'd been left this small, locked box. Erin had assumed it held sentimental trinkets, and in her grief had never opened it. She found the tiny key on her key ring. Inside there wasn't jewelry. There was just a single folded letter and a business card. The card was heavy, cream-colored stock. It read, "Arthur Kensington, Senior Vice President, J.P. Morgan, Private Bank." The letter was written in her aunt's elegant, spidery script. "My dearest Erin, if you are reading this, it is likely because the world has proven to be as cruel as I always warned you it was, or you've turned 45, whichever comes first. You are brilliant, Erin. You have a mind for structure and beauty that this family never understood. I watched you give up your dreams for that charming, hollow man. A predator always knows a gentle soul. I did not leave you a simple inheritance. Money is a burden until it is a tool. I left you power. When our family's tech stocks were nothing I invested. I never sold. Mr. Kensington at J.P. Morgan manages the Isolde Cloud Trust. It is yours fully and completely upon two conditions: you reach your 45th birthday, or you provide Mr. Kensington with proof of financial or personal ruin. I imagine that husband of yours will provide the latter quite efficiently. Don't use this to buy back your old life, Erin. It's tainted. Use it to build a new one. Use it to build an empire. Don't get sad. Get even. Your loving and very, very rich Aunt Isolde. Erin's hands were shaking. She stared at the card. It had to be a joke. Her aunt was an artist, a bohemian. The next morning, with Sarah by her side, Erin made the call from a pay-as-you-go phone. She was routed through 3 assistants before a warm British voice came on the line. Ms. Cloud, Erin, we have been waiting for your call. Your aunt was a most remarkable woman. I am so sorry for the circumstances, but I am authorized to confirm the Isolde Cloud Trust is fully vested to you. We have been managing the portfolio for 2 decades. After capital gains and estate taxes, the current liquid value is, let me see, $78,500,000. Sarah choked on her coffee. Erin dropped the phone. She picked it up, her entire body vibrating with a strange, cold energy. Mr. Kensington, she said, her voice no longer the whisper of a victim, but the clear, sharp tone of a CEO. I need you to liquidate $50 million in assets by noon, and I need the name of the most ruthless corporate litigation firm in Chicago, not a divorce lawyer, a shark. The next time Erin saw Mr. Davies, the legal aid lawyer, she was flanked by 2 men in dark suits from Kirkland & Ellis, one of the most powerful law firms in the world. She had paid Mr. Davies's firm a consulting fee of $50,000 for his initial help and kindness. Erin, Miss Cloud, what is this? He stammered, staring at the men. This Mr. Davies is my new team, Erin said. She was different. Her hair was cut into a sharp architectural bob. She wore a tailored black suit. The grief was still there, but it had been forged into something hard. They'll be taking over. We're not just filing for an injunction. We're launching a full-scale investigation into Marcus Cloud for wire fraud, bank fraud, and conspiracy. The new legal team descended on Marcus like a tactical unit. They filed subpoenas for his personal and business accounts, for Chloe's accounts, for every LLC he'd ever formed. They hired a forensic accounting team, Kroll Associates, to trace every dollar. What they found was worse than Erin could have imagined. Marcus wasn't just a simple cheat. He was in deep. He had been funneling his clients' money, millions of dollars, into a series of high-risk, fraudulent real estate ventures. He was running a Ponzi scheme. He hadn't sold the house to Chloe just for the affair. He'd sold it to her, using his clients' stolen money to hide the asset from his creditors before his entire scheme collapsed. He's desperate, Erin's new lawyer. A sharp woman named Maria Liu explained. He's not just running from you. He's running from federal prison. He needed to liquidate everything, disappear, and start over in a non-extradition country with Chloe. And the house? Erin asked, her heart pounding. He's trying to flip it. Fast. He and Chloe are planning to sell it to a developer who has been sniffing around Willow Creek, a shell company called Apex Properties. A cold recognition hit Erin. Apex Properties. She'd seen their name. They were the ones who had been sending aggressive low-ball offers to all the residents in Willow Creek, trying to buy up the historic homes. The neighborhood committee which she used to lead had been fighting them for months. They're vultures, Erin said. They want to tear down the historic homes and build those glass and steel monstrosities. Exactly, Maria said. And Marcus is about to hand them the key to the neighborhood. Your house is the cornerstone of the historic district. If it falls, the zoning board will buckle and the rest of the neighborhood will be forced to sell. Erin looked at the map of Willow Creek on the table. Her street, her neighbors. Old Mrs. Henderson, the young couple with the new baby, the park she had redesigned. Marcus wasn't just destroying her past. He was trying to destroy her entire community. Mr. Kensington, Erin said into her phone, I need you to form a new LLC for me, immediately. A real estate development corporation. Of course, Miss Cloud. And the name, Erin looked out the window of the high-rise office down at the city. She thought of the fire that had burned her life to the ground. She thought of what rises from it. Call it Phoenix Residential. And its purpose, we're going shopping, Erin said, a cold smile touching her lips for the first time in weeks. I'm going to buy a neighborhood. Marcus and Chloe were living in a paranoid bubble. The sudden, aggressive legal assault had terrified them. Their bank accounts were frozen. A lien was placed on the house on Magnolia Drive. They couldn't sell it. They couldn't access their money. They were trapped. Marcus, in his arrogance, believed he could still outsmart everyone. He arranged a clandestine meeting with the CEO of Apex Properties, a ruthless developer named Julian Thorne. Thorne was a shark in a Brioni suit, a man who saw Willow Creek not as a community, but as a square on a spreadsheet. The deal is off, Marcus, Thorne said, meeting him in the sterile lobby of a downtown hotel. The property is encumbered. Your wife or ex-wife has an army of lawyers crawling all over it. It's toxic. I can fix this, Marcus pleaded, his usual charm replaced with a sheen of desperate sweat. It's a temporary injunction. My lawyers can get it lifted. Your lawyers? Thorne laughed. You can't even afford your lawyers. They're dropping you. I, on the other hand, can make this go away. I can buy the house, pay off the lien, and give you a small finder's fee that your wife's team can't touch. An offshore account, enough to disappear. How much? Marcus asked. 1 million. And in exchange you also help me convince the other residents of Willow Creek to sell to me. Convince them how. You were their neighbor. You know their secrets. You know who's in debt, who has a sick relative. You find their pressure points. I'll do the rest. Marcus, cornered, agreed. He had gone from master of the universe to a common thug. What neither of them knew was that the waiter filling their water glasses was a private investigator hired by Phoenix Residential. Erin heard the entire conversation. He's using my old neighbors, she said, her voice shaking with rage. He's going to threaten them. It's worse, Erin, Maria Liu said. Thorne isn't just a developer. He's under investigation by the SEC. Our forensic team found a link. He and Marcus were in on the Ponzi scheme together. Apex Properties was the real estate venture Marcus was funneling his clients' money into. Erin finally saw the whole picture. Marcus stole the house to pay off his debts to Thorne and to get a seat at the table. Chloe was just a useful idiot, a cover story. We have them, Maria said. We have enough for a federal case. We can leak this, and the FBI will have them both in cuffs by dinner. Erin was silent for a long moment. She looked at the map of Willow Creek. If Thorne and Marcus were arrested, now Apex Properties would be thrown into chaos, its assets frozen. Including the houses in Willow Creek they already owned, they'd managed to buy 4. The whole neighborhood would be in legal limbo for years, decaying. "No," Erin said. "Not yet. An arrest freezes the game. I need to win it." The next day, the residents of Willow Creek received 2 letters. The first was from Apex Properties, a final aggressive offer full of legal threats about eminent domain and neighborhood decay, implying their homes would soon be worthless. The second letter arrived an hour later on thick, elegant cardstock. It was from Phoenix Residential. It was a personal letter from Erin. She told them her story. She told them exactly what Marcus and Apex had done. And then she made her own offer. She wasn't offering to buy their homes. She was offering to invest in them. Phoenix Residential offered to pay 20% above market value to any resident who wanted to sell. But for those who wanted to stay, she offered something better. Her firm would provide interest-free loans for home restoration, upgrade the neighborhood's infrastructure, new sidewalks, buried power lines, and fund a new charter school. In exchange, the residents would agree to place their homes in a historic trust, legally protecting Willow Creek from developers like Apex forever. She was saving the neighborhood, not by buying it, but by fortifying it. She ended the letter with an invitation to a town hall meeting at the end of the week. Julian Thorne was furious. He had been outmaneuvered, but he still held the 4 houses he'd already bought, and he was determined to get Erin's old house the key to the district. He doubled down, pushing his lawyers to break the lien Marcus's wife had placed on it. The Willow Creek Community Hall was packed. The air was thick with fear, anger, and confusion. They were neighbors who had known Erin for a decade. They had seen her gardening. They had pitied her whispering about the humiliating way Marcus had thrown her out. Now she stood at the podium, flanked by her legal team, the picture of power and composure. "I know you're all scared," Erin began, her voice amplified by the microphone. "You've been bullied by Apex Properties. You've been threatened. And I know that the man who did this was my husband. He betrayed me, but he also betrayed all of you." She laid out the evidence, the link between Marcus and Julian Thorne, the Ponzi scheme, the plan to tear down their homes. The residents gasped. "Apex wants you to believe your homes are worthless," Erin continued. "I'm here to tell you that your homes are priceless, and I am not here to buy you out. I am here to be your partner." She presented her plan, the restoration loans, the new park, the historic trust. "Julian Thorne and Apex Properties want to tear down your memories. I want to give them a new coat of paint. I want to restore the foundations." An old woman in the front row, Mrs. Henderson, who had lived on Magnolia Drive for 50 years, stood up. "Erin, dear, this sounds wonderful. But Apex already owns 4 properties, and they're still fighting for yours. How can we stop them? They'll just build their glass towers around us. They'll block out the sun." "That's a very good question, Mrs. Henderson," Erin said. "Apex thinks they can wait us out. They think I'm just one woman. But I'm not. I'm a resident, and I have the capital to fight them on their own turf. As of this morning, Phoenix Residential has put in an offer to buy the debt that Julian Thorne used to finance his company." The crowd looked confused. Maria Liu stepped up. "Let me translate," Maria said with a grin. "Mr. Thorne's company Apex is built on a mountain of high-interest loans from private equity. We are currently in negotiations to acquire that mountain. If we do, Erin won't just be his competitor. She'll be his bank. She'll own him." A wave of laughter and applause rippled through the crowd. "But first," Erin said, holding up a hand, "we have to deal with the houses they already own, and my old house." "How?" someone shouted. "Thanks to Mr. Thorne's illegal activities, which we've shared with the SEC, his assets are about to be seized and put up for public auction to pay back the investors he and Marcus defrauded. That includes the 5 houses in Willow Creek." The room fell silent. "An auction," Mrs. Henderson said, her hand at her throat. "But dear, that means anyone can buy them. Thorne could just buy them back." "He could," Erin agreed, "but he'll have to go through me first. The auction is in 2 days, and I promise you all, I will not be outbid." Meanwhile, in a cramped prepaid apartment, Marcus and Chloe were watching a live stream of the town hall on a laptop. Chloe was frantic. "Our accounts are frozen, Marcus. The house is being seized. That witch is going to ruin us." Marcus was pale. He wasn't just ruined. He was trapped. Erin wasn't just coming for the money. She was coming for everything. He saw the news ticker on the bottom of the screen. "Federal grand jury convenes in Apex Properties fraud case." "She's not just buying the neighborhood," he whispered, finally understanding the scope of his miscalculation. "She's building a fortress, and she's locking us out." "What do we do?" Chloe wailed. Marcus looked at the door. He still had one fake passport, one last escape route. He looked at Chloe, her face blotchy from crying, her expensive hair a mess. She was no longer a beautiful asset. She was a witness. I need to think," he said, grabbing his keys. "Stay here." He walked out of the apartment, got in his car, and drove not to a lawyer, but toward the Canadian border. He left Chloe behind without a second glance. The air in room 304 of the Cook County Courthouse was thick and stale, smelling of old carpet ozone from the humming fluorescent lights and the damp wool of coats. It was a room devoid of grandeur, with pale, water-stained ceiling tiles and rows of unforgiving wooden benches. Yet on this grey November morning, it was the most expensive theatre in Chicago. The room was packed. The front rows were a sea of dark suits lawyers for the creditors, a few bottom-feeding developers, smelling blood in the water, and the press a mix of local news crews and stringers for financial journals. In the back, a tight, nervous cluster of 20 men and women sat together. They were the heart of Willow Creek. Mrs. Henderson was there, her hands knotted around a worn leather handbag. The young couple who had just had their baby, the husband bouncing the child nervously on his knee. They were here as a silent jury, their faces a mixture of terror and fragile hope. On the right side of the aisle, Julian Thorne sat flanked by 2 remaining lawyers from his once formidable firm. The men looked grim, their briefcases thin. Thorne, however, projected a defiant arrogance. He was dressed in a pristine Brioni suit, his silver hair perfectly coiffed. But a small jumping muscle in his jaw and the pallor beneath his expensive tan betrayed the sheer animal panic he was trying to contain. He was a king, reduced to fighting over the last scraps of his own burning castle. On the left side sat Erin. She was the picture of calm, a still point in the swirling anxiety of the room. She wore a deep navy blue suit, tailored to perfection. It was armor. Beside her, Maria Liu had a laptop open, one hand resting on it, the other holding a pen. A few seats down, Arthur Kensington, the senior vice president of her private bank, had flown in from New York. He wasn't there as a banker. He was there, as he'd put it, to see your aunt's investment philosophy finally put into practice. Erin's gaze was fixed on the auctioneer's podium. She did not look at Julian Thorne. She did not need to. She could feel his hatred, a cold, radioactive energy burning at the side of her face. Marcus, she had learned, was not present. A federal warrant had been issued for his arrest 3 days prior after he failed to appear at a preliminary hearing. He was officially a fugitive from justice. Chloe, after being abandoned by Marcus with no money and a frozen apartment, had been picked up by the FBI. She had, in a single terrified 12-hour session, given a full and tearful confession, detailing every crime, every hidden account, every conversation in exchange for a reduced sentence as a material witness. It was over for them. But the fate of Willow Creek, the physical breathing neighborhood, was still on the block. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer, a man with a rapid nasal voice, announced, tapping his microphone. "We are here to conduct the asset forfeiture auction for case 771B regarding the frozen holdings of Apex Properties and its principal Julian Thorne to satisfy the claims of his creditors." A low murmur went through the room. Thorne sat like a stone statue. "We will begin with the 4 properties located in the Willow Creek Historic District, followed by the 5th separately encumbered property. We will proceed with Lot 1, the property at 112 Magnolia Drive." A picture of the house flashed on the projectors, a quaint Tudor revival. "A beautiful property. Bidding will start at $500,000. Before the auctioneer could even finish one of Thorne's lawyers, a junior associate raised his paddle. $500,000! It was a weak, obligatory opening. Thorne was trying to show he was still in the game. Maria Liu nodded at Erin. Erin's paddle, branded with the number 101, shot up. $1 million, Erin said, her voice clear and carrying across the room. The room gasped. It wasn't a bid. It was an execution. She hadn't raised him. She had doubled the starting price instantly, signaling that this was not a negotiation. Thorne's lawyer, who had clearly been given instructions to fight, looked at his boss. Thorne, his face rigid, gave a short, sharp nod. $1,100,000, the lawyer said, his voice hesitant. Erin's paddle didn't go down. It stayed up. $1,500,000. This time the silence was absolute. She wasn't just bidding. She was burning his money for sport. Thorne's lawyer looked at him again, pleadingly. Thorne stared at Erin, his eyes narrowing to slits. He was doing the math. This was a war of attrition, and she had all the ammunition. He shook his head, a tiny, furious gesture. The lawyer lowered his paddle. $1.5 million. Going once. Going twice. Sold, the gavel cracked. To bidder 101, Phoenix Residential. Mrs. Henderson let out a sob of relief. One down. Next, the auctioneer said, moving on. Lot 2. The property at 118 Magnolia Drive. We'll start the bidding at $500,000. Thorne's lawyer opened again as instructed. $500,000. Erin's paddle went up. $1 million. A nervous laugh rippled through the press row. Thorne's lawyer didn't even bother to counter. He just shook his head. Sold. The gavel cracked again. To Phoenix Residential. 2 down. Julian Thorne's face was now a mask of thunder. He had been publicly neutered, his powerlessness exposed. He had come here for a fight and was being dismissed like a pest. Lot 3, the auctioneer called. 140 Magnolia Drive. Bidding starts at $500,000. This time Thorne's lawyer sat on his hands. Thorne was clearly saving every last penny of his liquid capital for the main prize, Erin's house. $500,000, Erin said, opening the bidding herself. $550, a new voice called from the middle rows. Erin Mariah and Mr. Kensington all turned. A man in a tan suit, holding paddle 208, had bid. He was flanked by 2 other men. "Who is that?" Erin whispered to Maria. Maria was already typing. "One moment. Paddle 208 is registered to a shell company, Redwood Holdings. Let me check the registry. 600,000, Erin said, turning back to the auctioneer. 650, the Redwood Holdings man countered immediately. He hadn't looked at Erin. He was staring at the auctioneer, his face placid. 700, Erin said. 750, the man replied, his voice a monotone. A new dynamic had entered the room. This wasn't Thorne. This was a professional, a developer who saw 4 houses in a prime district being snapped up and wanted a piece of the action. "Maria," Erin pressed. "They're clean," Maria whispered, her fingers flying. "Delaware shell funded by a private equity group out of Boston. They're just a standard developer. They're not with Thorne. They just smell a bargain." 800, Erin said. 850, the man in the tan suit said. The residents in the back were holding their breath. This was a complication they hadn't foreseen. "Erin," Mr. Kensington said softly, leaning past Maria. "Don't get into a war of pride. The asset isn't worth this much, not with the restoration costs." "It's not about this one asset, Arthur," Erin said. Her eyes locked on the picture of the house. "It's about the perimeter. I can't have a hostile developer squatting in the middle of the neighborhood. It undermines the entire historic trust. I don't just need my house, I need all of them." She raised her paddle. $1 million. The man from Redwood Holdings paused. He looked at Erin for the first time. He saw her Mr. Kensington of J.P. Morgan and Maria Liu of Kirkland & Ellis. He saw the phalanx of lawyers. He saw the ironclad resolve in her eyes. He was here for a quick flip. She was here for a crusade. He conferred with his colleagues. They shrugged. This was more trouble than it was worth. He placed his paddle face down on his lap. "Sold," the gavel cracked, "to Phoenix Residential." 3 down. "And now lot 4, the auctioneer said, sensing the tension. 133 Magnolia Drive, starting at 500,000. 500,000, Erin opened. 600,000, Thorne's lawyer snapped. Erin's head turned. This was a new tactic. Thorne was bidding again. He hadn't given up. He was trying to make her bleed. He wanted her to overpay for the 4th house, draining her reserves before the final battle for her own home. He thought her resources, while vast, were finite. He thought she was still running on an inheritance. He didn't realize she was running on a private bank with the full backing of her aunt's decades-old, compound growth-fueled portfolio. 700, Erin said. 800, Thorne's lawyer shot back. 1 million, Erin said, her voice bored as if swatting a fly. 1.1, Thorne's lawyer said, his voice cracking under the strain. 1.5, Erin countered. Thorne, enraged, grabbed the paddle from his own lawyer. 2 million, he shouted, his voice hoarse. The room went dead silent. He had just bid $2 million on a house worth at best $900,000. It was a desperate, spiteful, emotional act. He was burning his own money just to cost her. Erin paused. The residents behind her were trembling. This was the monster they had been fighting. She looked at Thorne, really looked at him for the first time that day. She saw the desperation. He needed her to fight him. He needed this to be a struggle. She gave him the cruelest cut of all. She lowered her paddle. "No," she said, just loud enough for the auctioneer to hear. Thorne froze. His face went from rage to sheer, uncomprehending horror. He had just spent $2 million, a huge chunk of his remaining capital, on a house he didn't even want, a house that was now a financial black hole. He had been goaded into punching himself in the face. Going once, going twice, the auctioneer said, stunned. Sold to bidder, 114 Apex Properties. Thorne slumped in his chair as if he'd been shot. He now owned a house he couldn't afford, an asset his creditors would immediately seize and force him to sell again at a loss. He had crippled himself. And now, the auctioneer said, taking a sip of water and straightening his tie. He seemed to understand that the preliminaries were over. We come to the final lot, the property at 220 Magnolia Drive. Erin's breath hitched. A picture of her home flashed on the screen. Her home. The porch she had designed, the windows she had washed, the garden she had planted, the door that had been slammed in her face. This was not business. This was reclamation. This property is the largest in the district and carries significant historical weight, the auctioneer intoned. It is the cornerstone of the Willow Creek community. Bidding will start at $2 million. Thorne, looking grey and broken, was conferred with by his last remaining lawyer. He had just burned $2 million, but he still had something left. This was his last stand. He had to get this house. It was his only remaining shred of collateral, his only hope. He straightened his suit, his face a grotesque mask of false confidence. He raised his paddle. $2 million. Erin's paddle shot up. $2.5 million. $3 million. Thorne shot back the words a snarl. $4 million. Erin said, her voice as calm as a frozen lake. The room was no longer breathing. This was not an auction. It was a duel. The numbers were just bullets. 4.5. Thorne said, his voice strained. He was near his limit. He was sweating now, the expensive tan streaked with perspiration. $5 million, Erin said. Thorne's lawyer put his hand on Thorne's arm, whispering furiously, Julian, we can't. That's the last of the reserves. We're done. Thorne shook him off. He stood up his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. $6 million. He roared, pointing his paddle at Erin, his face purple. You think you can waltz in here? You were nothing. You were a gardener, a housewife. This is my world. My world. I will see it bulldozed. I will see it turned to dirt before I let you have it. The auctioneer slammed his gavel. Order, order, sir. You must remain civil, or you will be removed. The residents gasped in horror. Mrs. Henderson was crying. Erin didn't flinch. She waited for the room to quiet down. The outburst had done exactly what she needed. It had exposed him, not as a businessman, but as a rabid animal. She leaned over to Maria. What's his absolute final to-the-grave limit, the most he could possibly leverage? Maria glanced at her screen, where the Kroll investigative team had fed her real-time data on his last known credit lines. He's posturing. After that idiotic $2 million purchase he has, maybe $7.1 million. Tops. If he bids that he is personally and professionally bankrupt, he won't have enough left for a bus ticket home. Erin nodded. Thank you. She could bid $7.2 million. She could win this by a single increment. But her aunt's voice echoed in her head. Don't get even. Build an empire. An empire needed a foundation. It needed to be built on something stronger than spite. It needed to be built on a statement. Julian Thorne was still standing, panting, his eyes wild. He was waiting for her $6.1 million bid. He was waiting for the fight. Erin raised her paddle number 101, $10 million. The number dropped into the room like a granite block. It was not a bid. It was a judgment. The man from Redwood Holdings who had stayed to watch the show let out a low whistle. The press corps erupted, cameras flashing. Thorne's face, it was a sight Erin would never forget. The rage, the defiance, the arrogance, it all evaporated, leaving behind a hollow, empty shell. The color drained from his face, leaving a waxy gray pallor. He didn't just look beaten. He looked erased. He had come to fight a housewife, only to find himself facing a financial entity he couldn't even comprehend. He was a rowboat trying to ram an aircraft carrier. He sat down heavily. His paddle clattered from his numb fingers and hit the floor. His lawyer, seeing the game was over, didn't even try to retrieve it. He just started packing his briefcase. $10 million, the auctioneer repeated, his own voice trembling slightly. Going once, going twice. He looked at the empty space where Thorne's paddle had been. The gavel cracked the sound like a gunshot in the silent room. Sold to bidder 101. Phoenix Residential. A roar erupted from the back of the room. The residents of Willow Creek were on their feet, sobbing, embracing, applauding. Mrs. Henderson gripped Erin's shoulder, her knuckles white. You did it, dear. You did it. You saved us. Erin finally let out the breath she felt she had been holding for a year. A single tear traced a hot path down her cheek. She hadn't just saved them. She had bought her life back. She had bought her home back. Mr. Kensington leaned in, his eyes twinkling. Your Aunt Miss Cloud would have been profoundly entertained. Well done. As Thorne sat paralyzed in his chair, two uniformed police officers, who had been standing discreetly at the back of the room, began to walk down the aisle. Thorne, in a last pathetic fit, saw a cameraman zooming in on his face. He lunged, knocking the camera to the ground. Julian Thorne, one of the officers said, grabbing his arm. Get your hands off me. Do you know who I am? Thorne blustered. Yes, sir, we do, the officer said, snapping a pair of handcuffs onto his wrist. You're under arrest for multiple counts of wire fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement in connection with the Apex Properties investigation. You need to come with us. As they led him babbling and defeated out of the courtroom, Erin Cloud stood up. The media swarmed her. Ms. Cloud. How does it feel? Was this revenge? What will you do with the neighborhood? Erin didn't answer. She put a comforting hand on Mrs. Henderson's arm, gave a grateful nod to Maria and Mr. Kensington, and walked, head held high, out of the courtroom. She didn't need to say a word. The gavel had said it all. The downfall of Marcus Cloud and Julian Thorne was swift and brutal. Thorne was arrested in the lobby of the courthouse, charged with multiple counts of wire fraud and conspiracy. He would spend the next 20 years in federal prison. Marcus was apprehended 2 days later by Canadian Border Patrol trying to cross into Quebec using a poorly made fake passport. He was extradited back to Chicago. With Chloe's testimony and the mountain of evidence from Erin's team, his trial was a formality. He was found guilty and sentenced to 25 years for his Ponzi scheme on top of the charges for fraud and forgery against Erin. The final piece of karma, however, was Erin's. As the legal owner of Apex Properties' debt, she was the primary creditor. When Marcus's personal assets were liquidated to pay his victims, Erin's lawyers made sure that the first victims in line were the clients he had defrauded. But there was one asset left, his finder's fee, that Thorne had hidden in an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Erin's team, with the help of federal authorities, clawed it back. It was $1 million. After his other clients were paid, that $1 million was awarded by the court by default to the last remaining creditor, his wife Erin, as part of their now finalized divorce settlement. The money that he had stolen, that he had sold his life for the money he was going to use to run away with, ended up in Erin's bank account. She donated every penny of it in Marcus's name to a shelter for victims of domestic and financial abuse. 1 year later, Willow Creek was unrecognizable in the best possible way. The sound of hammers and saws was constant. Erin's company, Phoenix Residential, had kept every promise. The new buried power lines meant the old-growth trees were no longer threatened. The sidewalks were new. The park was lush, and the historic homes were being restored to their former glory, one by one. Erin's restoration of the neighborhood won national architectural awards. Phoenix Residential was now one of the most respected community-first development firms in the country. She wasn't just a developer. She was a visionary. She never moved back into 220 Magnolia Drive. She stood on the sidewalk watching as a new sign was hung over the restored porch. The house had been her prison, and then her prize. Now it was her gift. The Isolde Cloud Center for Community, the sign read. It was a beautiful free-to-use space offering legal aid for women financial literacy classes and an architectural program for at-risk youth. Mrs. Henderson came up and stood beside her. "It's beautiful, Erin. What you've done. It's a miracle." "It's just a house, Mrs. H." Erin smiled. "It's the people inside that matter. And you, dear. You own this whole neighborhood now," the old woman said, patting her arm. "You're the landlord of all of Willow Creek. But you're not moving back in." Erin looked up at the house, her gaze clear and strong. "No, my aunt told me not to buy back my old life. She told me to build a new one." She pointed to a smaller, modern, and beautifully designed new home she had built for herself at the end of the street. "I like the view from there much better." The final scene, the one that played on the local news, was a split screen. On one side, Marcus Cloud, in a faded orange prison jumpsuit, gaunt and grey, mopping a hallway in a federal penitentiary. On the other side, Erin Cloud, cutting a ribbon at the community center, surrounded by cheering neighbors, her face bright and powerful, the undisputed and beloved owner of the entire neighborhood. They say the best revenge is living well. But Erin proved that building well is even better. She didn't just take back her life. She rebuilt an entire community and took her power back brick by brick. Her story is a powerful reminder that no matter how completely someone tries to burn your life to the ground, you have the power to rise from those ashes and build an empire. What did you think of Erin's ultimate comeback? Was Marcus's karma hard enough? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you loved this story of drama betrayal and ultimate triumph, please make sure to like this video and share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss another story. Thanks for listening. Do you believe that walls can talk? That sometimes the very bricks around us hold stories too raw, too tangled to speak aloud? This is the story of a man who shattered hearts and trust in one swift stroke, erasing his unborn baby's name from the nursery wall. Little did he know that fate would carve that same name into the towering facade of his company's newest building. Love, ambition, betrayal, and redemption twist through every corridor of this tale. Buckle in for a journey that delves into hidden pasts and uncertain futures, where every character holds a key to a devastating secret. The late afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows of Alexander Haven's corner office at Horizon Global Ventures. The golden light cast a halo on the gleaming awards and plaques that lined the walls, each one echoing the success that the Haven family had worked generations to achieve. Alexander, a tall, imposing figure with silver-streaked hair at just 38, leaned back in his leather chair, drumming his fingers on the polished mahogany desk. His gaze cold and distant, fixed on an ornate pen, an anniversary gift from his wife, Cassandra. In that moment, the pen symbolized everything that had once been simple and hopeful in his life. Now it only served as a reminder of secrets he had kept the people he had hurt. He had always prided himself on his ability to control every variable in his life. But as the afternoon light drifted across the office, he realized control had slipped through his fingers the very day he found out Cassandra was pregnant. They had never spoken much about children before. Sure, there were the passing fantasies of a large family, or a small one, depending on the day, but their careers always took center stage. Cassandra was a brilliant architect who had designed luxury estates from London to Bali. It was her passion, her calling. She had come from a humble background, and each building she created was a testament to how far she'd climbed. Alexander's phone buzzed. The name on the caller ID read Cassandra, and he felt a rush of guilt swirl inside him. She'd called 5 times that day, and each call had gone to voicemail. Now, perhaps out of reflex, he answered. Cassandra's voice was tight. She used his pet name, though the warmth that usually accompanied it was missing. "We need to talk. I'm at the house." Alexander swallowed. "I'll be there soon." He left the office without a backward glance, ignoring the stares of his employees as he stalked past glass-walled conference rooms. He drove to their estate on the outskirts of the city, a sprawling piece of land overshadowed by centuries-old oaks. The driveway alone was half a mile of winding pavement lined with perfectly manicured hedges. When he finally stepped inside, an uneasy silence welcomed him. Years ago, upon first acquiring the property, he and Cassandra had dreamed of filling those halls with laughter, children's voices, dinner parties, new memories. They even had a room at the end of the upstairs corridor, designated as a nursery, its walls once adorned with gentle pastel colors. A rocking chair Cassandra's grandmother had passed down, and a small name plaque they'd chosen for their soon-to-be child, the child who would never come. He found Cassandra in the nursery. The walls were now blank, the rocking chair shoved into a corner. She stood with her back to him, arms crossed, shoulders trembling. "What have you done?" Her voice was steady, yet thick with pain. Alexander closed his eyes for a moment. He had instructed the staff to repaint the nursery and remove all traces of the name they had once agreed upon Adrian. It had been a reckless, impulsive decision, one made out of heartbreak and the fear of being haunted by a memory of what could have been. Losing the baby had hit him in a place he never knew existed, so he did the one thing that made sense at the time: erase everything that reminded him of it. Cassandra turned, revealing tears clinging to her lashes. "We never even talked about it," she whispered. "You just had them remove his name, like he never existed." "I couldn't stand it," Alexander said, his voice low. "Couldn't stand walking by this room and seeing that name every day. It hurt too much." She stared at him, eyes glassy with betrayal. "Hurt too much? For whom? For you?" She took a trembling breath. "Because I still dream of him at night. I wake up and forget he's gone. And now there's nothing left of him at all, except the emptiness. His throat burned. He wanted to hold her, to promise her it would be okay. But the chasm between them felt too wide. Cassandra brushed past him, leaving only the scent of her expensive perfume and heartbreak in the air. He stood in the barren nursery, haunted by the absence of the name that used to be there. He thought about how that single act of painting over a memory had torn him and Cassandra further apart, and he wondered if they would ever find their way back. Yet destiny had other plans. The name he'd buried was about to resurface in a place he'd never expect etched in stone on the facade of a building that would soon reshape both their lives. Long before he met Cassandra, Alexander Haven was raised in a world of opulence. The Havens were a known name in Massachusetts, their family wealth tracing back to old shipping lines that made fortunes in the 19th century. Over time, their empire evolved into real estate investment banking and eventually high-tech ventures. Alexander's father, Gordon Haven, was a formidable presence, meticulous, shrewd, and intimidating. He had raised Alexander with the mantra, legacy. First everything else, second. While this instilled in Alexander a relentless drive for success, it also planted deep insecurities. He had grown to view relationships as stepping stones or potential pitfalls. Even in personal matters, he measured the risk and potential reward. Growing up, he rarely visited friends' homes, almost never had a slumber party or carefree evening away from the watchful eyes of his father and their entourage of staff. He was groomed for leadership, taught to win at any cost. Cassandra Delgado was nothing like the women in Alexander's social circle. A self-made prodigy, her architectural breakthroughs in eco-friendly designs caught the attention of environmentalists, real estate moguls, and philanthropists alike, including Bill and Melinda Gates, who admired her commitment to sustainability. Some whispered that she was on the short list to design a new philanthropic research center that Mark Zuckerberg was rumored to be funding. No one dared question her brilliance. She had an almost mystical ability to see aesthetics and engineering as two halves of the same whole. They met at a fundraising gala for a children's hospital in Boston. Cassandra was there to pitch a new pediatric ward design concept, one that would integrate nature-inspired spaces to comfort children during treatments. Alexander, ironically, was there to represent the Haven family's charitable giving, something that always gave them positive publicity, though the real philanthropic intentions were sometimes overshadowed by the press releases. Their connection was instant, and it went beyond physical attraction. Alexander, drawn to her fiery determination, found himself opening up in ways he never had. Cassandra, for her part, saw in him a man who yearned for genuine passion outside his business fortress. They talked about innovative building designs, philanthropic aspirations, and the ways architecture could shape a better future. Where Alexander was methodical, Cassandra was creative. Where he built walls, she tore them down. They married quickly, too quickly, some said, and formed what Boston's high society regarded as the power couple of the decade. At first, Alexander integrated Cassandra into the Haven empire, seamlessly trusting her insight to innovate in areas where the family's vision had grown stale. In turn, she reveled in the resources the Haven family's wealth provided, designing experimental complexes, advanced living facilities, and eco-conscious high-rises. Yet as the months wore on, Alexander's father Gordon began to question Cassandra's long-term loyalty. She wasn't from their world. Old money had a certain set of unspoken rules, and Cassandra wasn't one to follow them blindly. Over time, tensions rose. Cassandra refused to let the Haven name overshadow her personal identity. She pressed for her own brand recognition in architectural circles, which Gordon felt threatened the collective family prestige. Alexander stood uncomfortably between his father and his wife, often appeasing one at the expense of the other. Then came the pregnancy. For a moment, everything looked bright. Both Alexander and Cassandra believed that introducing a new life into their family might unify them in a deeper way. Gordon, too, softened at the idea of a grandchild to continue the Haven line. The baby would be named Adrian, after Cassandra's beloved grandfather, who had encouraged her to pursue architecture before he passed. The pregnancy also aligned with a major business venture. Alexander was spearheading an enormous real estate project in downtown Boston. He'd collaborated with City Hall to turn a derelict block into a modern corporate park, one that would bear the Haven name and stand as a testament to the family's ongoing influence. But fate was cruel. Complications led to a tragic miscarriage. Cassandra spiraled into grief, and Alexander retreated behind his stoic walls, shutting out his own pain. It was easier for him to bury it beneath new projects, negotiations, and deals than to face the magnitude of what they lost. And so the nursery remained untouched, a silent reminder until the day he decided to erase Adrian's name from its walls. The heartbreak in Cassandra's eyes that afternoon was not something that could be easily fixed. Their once tightly woven tapestry of ambition and love was unraveling. Little did either of them know just how violently the threads would be pulled apart by events lurking on the horizon. Time marched on. Work never stopped at Horizon Global Ventures. The real estate project that Alexander had been orchestrating, officially dubbed the Haven Complex, was inching closer to its grand unveiling. This multi-building campus promised to revitalize downtown Boston, merging state-of-the-art office spaces with green rooftops, large communal parks, and advanced energy-efficient technologies. Cassandra had contributed some early design concepts before her grief took her away from many responsibilities, and Alexander had allowed her that distance, not wanting to impose further stress. One crisp morning, Alexander's mind was spinning through a dozen tasks as he stepped out of his black SUV in front of the nearly completed Haven complex. He was there to do a final walkthrough before the massive media event scheduled 2 weeks later. Broad columns flanked an enormous plaza in the center of the development, lined with glass-clad towers that reached skyward. The sweet tang of fresh cement and the buzz of construction filled the air. His team of architects and investors trailed behind him, bustling with excitement to show off the progress. Alexander nodded politely, scanning the site with a practiced gaze. They crossed the plaza and approached the main tower, which soared upwards in shimmering glass and steel. A large ceremonial wall next to the entrance was reserved for a special unveiling, an inscription dedicated to the vision and future of the Haven legacy. Rumor had it that Alexander intended to carve a quote or place an emblem to commemorate the family's dedication to progress. Just as they were about to enter the tower, the site manager Miriam Kelly hurried up to Alexander with an odd look on her face. "Mr. Haven," she said, pushing her black-rimmed glasses up her nose. "We've discovered something on the decorative facade. It wasn't part of the official design, but it appears to be etched deep into the stone. It will take significant effort and time to remove." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "Etched like graffiti?" "Not exactly. It's a name, sir." She paused, swallowing hard. "Adrian." In an instant, Alexander's heart dropped. He stiffened. The mere mention of that name here in the heart of his largest development felt like a cosmic punch to the gut. "How did it get her there?" he demanded, voice taut. "We're still investigating," she replied. Voice hushed. It's small, but it's chiseled in a way that's deliberate, with actual stone carving techniques. Not just some random tagger with a spray can. It's on a corner of the decorative stone panel, just to the right of the building's main entrance. We can remove it, but it will leave a visible patch unless we replace the entire panel, which might take weeks to reorder and install. A swirl of memories and guilt flooded Alexander. He could still see Cassandra's tear-stained eyes the day he repainted the nursery walls. Why here, why now? Was this some act of sabotage, or was it a bizarre coincidence? He turned to his team, feigning control. Gather the crew. Let's see this for ourselves. They walked around to the side of the building near the main entrance. Indeed, on the lower corner of a heavy stone block, in ornate script no more than 3 inches tall, he saw the name Adrian. It glinted in the morning light, as if mocking him. The cut was smooth, professionally done. Alexander felt as though the ghost of his child had found a way to appear at the very heart of his business empire. The crowd of engineers and project managers murmured, but none dared speak the name aloud again. Everyone felt the tension rippling from Alexander. Finally, he cleared his throat. Get the best stonemason to see if it can be carefully removed without replacing the entire block, he said, scanning their faces. And I want a full investigation. Check security footage, see who came through here. This is private property. There must be cameras. Miriam nodded. Yes, Mr. Haven. As the group filed away, Alexander stared at the etched name. Questions churned in his mind. Was someone trying to torment him? Or was it Cassandra, grappling with the memory of Adrian in her own anguished way? He knew she was a talented designer, but stone carving was not her skill set. Still, doubt flickered. He traced the letters with his fingertips, fighting the tightness in his chest. Adrian. A child who never got a chance at life, but who somehow kept reappearing. No matter how hard he tried to erase the name, it found its way back. The day after discovering the name on the building, Alexander hardly slept. Anxiety wrapped around him like a vice fueled by a new wave of tension at home. Cassandra, though physically present at their estate, felt emotionally distant. She had withdrawn to her personal design studio behind the house, offering no explanation for her absences or solitary nights. At the office, Alexander was met with an undercurrent of gossip. Employees whispered in hallways, exchanging glances when he passed. He knew they suspected something, that the etched name must hold personal significance. The Haven Empire might have soared on the wings of success, but it also flew through corridors built on secrets and half-truths. Desperate for answers, Alexander plunged himself into the security footage from the site. Along with Miriam and a small group of trusted IT specialists, he spent hours scrubbing through camera angles. They found little out of the ordinary, no suspicious intruders, no after-hours trespassers. The building's exterior cameras had either not been angled to that specific patch of stone or were obscured by scaffolding. It was possible that someone had hidden in a blind spot, but a near-total blank didn't satisfy him. He was certain there had to be more. Someone must have had both motive and access. Then a glitch on one camera's timestamp caught his eye. A short segment no more than 15 minutes was missing from the official logs. He turned to the IT specialist, a wiry young man named Conrad. "You see this?" Alexander said, pointing to the gap. "We're missing footage between 2:30 and 2:45 a.m. last Tuesday." Conrad tapped on his keyboard, sweat forming at his temples. "It looks like a forced corruption in the data. Someone with advanced knowledge of our systems might have done this deliberately." Alexander's fury rose. He felt his hands clench into fists. We pay for state-of-the-art security, yet here we are. I want a list of everyone who had access to these cameras that night. Conrad nodded. Of course, Mr. Haven. As the day wore on, a handful of potential suspects emerged: employees, contractors, or external tech consultants who had the clearance to handle or manipulate the security feeds. But none stood out as having a personal vendetta to carve Adrian into the building's facade. As far as Alexander knew, that name and its significance were known only to family and a few close friends. Just before evening, he slipped away from the office to pay an unannounced visit to Cassandra's personal design studio. It was a minimalist glass annex behind their main residence, filled with sprawling drafting tables, half-finished models, and large windows overlooking a secluded garden. He found her hunched over a blueprint, wearing a plain black turtleneck and leggings. She barely acknowledged him when he stepped inside. "We need to talk," he said, his voice gentler than he intended. The tension between them was suffocating, but anger wouldn't help. She shrugged, maintaining focus on the blueprint. "About what?" He took a step closer. The name etched on the new building. Adrian. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? She stood up slowly, her eyes narrowed in astonishment. "What makes you think I would do that?" Alexander exhaled. "I'm not accusing you of anything, but you've been distant, and I know how important Adrian's memory is to you. This could be some act of grief." She paced across the studio, frustration evident. "So because I'm grieving, I'd break into your construction site in the dead of night and carve our baby's name on stone. Is that really what you think of me, Alexander?" He winced at the use of his full name. "I just need answers." Cassandra's eyes brimmed with tears. "I can't even stand looking at that building. It reminds me of what you did to the nursery, wiping away Adrian's name like he never existed. I'm not stepping foot near your precious Haven complex, let alone defacing it." Alexander stared at the floor. Guilt and suspicion clashed in his chest. He wanted to believe her. Over the years, she'd proven herself to be honorable and true, even if they were drifting apart. She picked up a small clay model she was working on, a conceptual piece for a pediatric clinic in Honduras. "This is how I honor Adrian," she said softly, tapping the model. "By designing places that help children. Because that was our dream, wasn't it? To do something meaningful for families. That dream died a little the day you repainted that room." "Stung?" Alexander nodded, unable to muster a response. He turned to leave, pausing at the door. "If you remember anything that might help, or if you see anything suspicious, you'll tell me." She nodded, though her expression made it clear she believed if Alexander really cared about her, he'd know how deeply he'd wounded her. He left the studio feeling colder than when he'd arrived. Over the next week, Alexander's frustrations mounted. His father Gordon, who had been conspicuously absent for months, supposedly overseas on business, unexpectedly returned. Gordon always had a knack for appearing at the worst possible time. One evening, he summoned Alexander to the Old Haven mansion in Beacon Hill, the historic family seat that Alexander had avoided since his childhood. Alexander arrived to find Gordon waiting in the study, a cavernous room lined with dusty tomes and antique furniture that smelled like old leather. 2 crystal glasses of expensive cognac sat on the table untouched. Son Gordon said, his deep voice echoing. "I've been hearing rumors. Something about the name Adrian carved into your new building. Care to explain?" Alexander's jaw clenched. He'd never told his father the baby's name. That was a conversation he and Cassandra had reserved for themselves, at least until the time was right. But perhaps gossip traveled faster than respect for privacy in Boston's elite circles. "Nothing to explain," Alexander replied, forcing calm. "It's vandalism, and I'm handling it." Gordon's expression was measured. "I understand losing a child is hard, but you need to keep your head in the game. The city is watching, the press is circling. You're set to be the face of this grand opening. Anything that smells of scandal or strife will tarnish the Haven name." Alexander's shoulders tensed. "Is that all you care about? The name not once have you asked how Cassandra or I are coping." Gordon's straightened lips pressed into a thin line. "Grief is personal. I'm not your therapist. But I do know the family legacy must remain intact. If you can't manage to keep it that way, I will step in." The threat lingered in the room like a noxious gas. Alexander took a long sip of the cognac, letting the burn steady his nerves. He was used to his father's cold approach to family matters. Showing vulnerability in front of Gordon was akin to bleeding in shark-infested waters. "That won't be necessary," Alexander said, determined. "I've got it under control." Gordon nodded, but the glint in his eyes said otherwise. "I trust you'll do what must be done." Their conversation ended abruptly. Alexander left, feeling the old mansion's oppressive weight crushing him. He hated that place. It reminded him of lonely childhood nights locked away in a stiff bedroom, while tutors and nannies drilled into him that everything was about legacy and image. Back at the estate, he found Cassandra's design studio empty. A quick text revealed she had gone to New York for a last-minute architecture symposium. In the past, she would have told him about any travel plans. He knew she was pulling away, forging her independence again, and it both frightened and angered him. Days marched on with no new leads about the carved name. The IT team found no conclusive evidence, and the stonemasons insisted it would cost tens of thousands of dollars to fix the etched stone, and that was assuming the project schedule could accommodate such a significant delay. With the grand opening fast approaching, Alexander faced a choice: reveal the name at the event, and risk a media circus, or patch it in a rushed manner, leaving an obvious scar on what was meant to be a pristine facade. He tried to push it from his mind by immersing himself in finalizing the details of the opening ceremony. He'd invited a roster of high-profile personalities, local politicians, celebrities, and philanthropic figures, even hoping to secure a cameo from Warren Buffett, who was rumored to be investing in a sustainable housing initiative. The event in many ways was a tribute to the Haven Empire's commitment to the future. Yet as the big day loomed, Alexander couldn't shake the eerie feeling that the name Adrian was more than a mere vandalism or cosmic coincidence. It felt like a reckoning for the callous way he had tried to paint over the nursery, to bury the sorrow too quickly. At last, the morning of the grand opening arrived. A crisp autumn breeze whipped through downtown Boston, sending leaves swirling around the newly laid plaza. Technicians bustled, finalizing the stage and sound systems. Towering banners bearing the Haven family crest fluttered from newly installed flagpoles. Alexander had spent the previous night practicing his speech in front of a mirror. He stood now backstage, wearing a tailored charcoal suit. Journalists with cameras angled for the best shot. Officials from City Hall mingled, and a small band rehearsed soft classical tunes. Despite the outward pomp, his mind was a tempest. He glanced at his phone, hoping to see a text from Cassandra, but there was nothing. She was back in Boston, but had not confirmed her attendance. He drew a slow breath, stepping onto the stage, as the announcer introduced him with a flourish. His speech began smoothly enough, praising Boston's heritage, the dedication of the city council, the employees of Horizon Global Ventures, and the bright future symbolized by the Haven complex. He had a practiced way with words, honed by years of press conferences and philanthropic galas. Then his eyes caught a glimpse of someone unexpected in the crowd, Cassandra. She stood at the back, arms folded, her expression unreadable. For a moment his voice faltered, but he forged ahead. Applause peppered his speech. Lights flashed, cameras rolled. He concluded with a statement on legacy, how the Haven family strived to build not just buildings, but also hope for the next generation. The audience clapped politely. Alexander turned, motioning toward the large drape that covered the ceremonial inscription on the wall near the building's main entrance. As the drape fell away, it revealed the words, "For innovation, for progress, for the future." The crowd erupted in cheers, but the stone just beneath still carried the small yet haunting name, Adrian, now partially obscured by a subtle attempt at patchwork. The name remained legible up close, and soon curious murmurs rippled through the attendees. The tension in Alexander's stomach coiled. He stepped down from the podium, greeting officials and exchanging forced smiles. Media swarmed, some noticing the strange etching on the stone. He braced for the questions, though he prayed none would come. Yet they did. "Mr. Haven, can you comment on the name etched beneath your new inscription?" Alexander stiffened, but forced a measured smile. "We had a minor issue with vandalism. It's already being addressed." Before more questions could swarm, an older man approached someone Alexander recognized from his father's entourage, Charles Deering, a retired advisor who had served the Haven family for decades. His grey eyes flickered with concern. "We should speak privately," Charles said, guiding Alexander away from the crowd. They slipped into a side passage of the building's lobby. Smooth marble floors reflected the overhead lights. Charles wasted no time. "I believe I have information about who might have carved that name," he said. "I didn't speak sooner because I wasn't entirely sure, but new evidence came to my attention." Alexander's pulse quickened. "Go on." Charles fished an envelope from inside his coat. "Someone sent me still images from a CCTV feed, dated the night the carving must have happened. However, they're from an external camera across the street, not your official site cameras." Alexander took the envelope and peered at the black and white stills. The images showed a figure in a hooded jacket near the building's entrance. The figure stooped in the exact spot where the name was later found. Despite the angle and darkness, it was clearly not Cassandra. The person appeared stockier, with broader shoulders. He flipped through more images. One partial side view, though grainy, made his chest tighten. The face was partially visible, just enough to recognize him as Elias Ward, a childhood friend of Alexander's who had once worked at Horizon Global Ventures, but left under tense circumstances. Elias's family had once been in business with the Havens, but a few years back, Elias had been ousted amid a scandal that implicated him in a questionable real estate deal. Alexander hadn't spoken to him since. He looked up at Charles. "Elias. Why would he do this?" Charles frowned. "He's harbored resentment for a long time. It's possible he knew about your baby's name. He might have learned it from staff or overheard it from your father's lips." Shaken, Alexander clutched the photos. It made sense in a twisted way. Elias was cunning, and if he wanted to strike at Alexander's psyche, carving Adrian into the building was a cruel but potent way to do it. "But how did he manage to force a corruption in our security footage?" Alexander asked. "He's an IT expert, Or at least he has connections, Charles replied. He could have bribed someone. Rage simmered in Alexander's veins. Elias had taken a private tragedy and warped it into a weapon. The whole fiasco with the building was to undermine Alexander, to remind him that no matter how high you climb, your vulnerabilities can still be used against you. Charles placed a hand on Alexander's shoulder. Be careful. Confronting him without evidence could be risky, but at least you now know who you're dealing with. Alexander nodded, pulses of adrenaline flooding his system. The revelation brought no solace. If anything, it deepened the emotional turmoil. He glanced toward the exit, spotting Cassandra watching him from afar. Her eyes flicked from him to the envelope in his hand, curiosity evident. He couldn't confront Elias publicly, not at that moment. But he had a sinking feeling that the worst was yet to come. That evening, after the event ended and the crowd dispersed, Alexander found Cassandra in the estate's expansive kitchen, rummaging for a late-night snack. The overhead light illuminated her exhaustion. She looked up as he entered, the question in her gaze, wordless but clear. He set the envelope on the marble island. It was Elias Ward. She blinked, confused. Elias? I haven't heard that name in ages. He carved Adrian's name on the building. Alexander nodded, pulling out the still images and laying them before her. He had access knowledge and a grudge. It's all here. She studied the images, her face darkening. I still don't understand his motive. Revenge. I had to let him go from Horizon a few years back, after he'd jeopardized one of our major deals. He's held a grudge ever since. Cassandra let out a slow breath. So in his twisted mind, your grief became his ammunition. That's beyond cruel. Alexander reached for her hand, longing for a connection they'd both neglected. I'm sorry. For how I handled everything with Adrian. For how I erased his name from the nursery. None of this justifies that. But I want you to know I regret it. She didn't pull away. I know you hurt too, Alec, but it felt like you tried to wash him out of our lives the moment it got too painful. He nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. I was wrong. They stood in quiet sorrow, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. For the first time in what felt like ages, they seemed united by the same sense of loss. Finally, Cassandra spoke. What are you going to do about Elias? Alexander inhaled. Confront him, but carefully. For now, I'll gather more definitive proof. Maybe we can keep it out of the courts. I just want him to understand there are consequences. Cassandra set the photos aside. I'll help however I can. It wasn't a declaration of forgiveness or a renewal of vows, but it was a step one that made Alexander's chest loosen just a fraction. 2 days later, Alexander received a cryptic text on his personal phone. We should talk. I have information you don't want made public. The bar at the Old Derby on Salem Street, 9 p.m. Come alone. It was unsigned, but the message felt like a signature of its own. Elias. Alexander hesitated. This was precisely the kind of clandestine meeting that could lead to a confrontation. Still, he needed to settle the issue. The swirl of rumors around the Haven complex had grown. Several local blogs were speculating about the mysterious name. He couldn't afford for the gossip to infect the project's reputation further, or to exploit Cassandra's private grief. At 9 p.m. sharp, Alexander arrived at the Old Derby, a dimly lit bar with dark wood booths and an ancient dusty chandelier. No sign announced who owned it, but it was an open secret that the place was a hangout for shady deals and hush-hush conversations. He spotted Elias in a corner booth, swirling a half-empty glass of whiskey. Shorter than Alexander, but built sturdier. Elias had a face etched by cynicism. He smirked when he saw Alexander approach. "I knew you'd come," Elias said, motioning for Alexander to sit. Alexander slid into the booth, crossing his arms. "You've got a lot of nerve. Carving Adrian's name. My baby's name into my building to prove some twisted point." Elias raised a brow. "It got your attention, didn't it?" Alexander bristled. "What do you want?" Elias sipped his whiskey. "An apology. Compensation. A chance at redemption. There was a time we were close friends, Alexander. I grew up with you. We planned on conquering the world together, but you kicked me to the curb without a second thought." "You committed fraud," Alexander hissed. "I had no choice." "You always have a choice," Elias corrected. "And I might have some interesting pieces of information that, if leaked, could shine a less than rosy light on your precious Haven empire. Not to mention some personal details about your marriage." Alexander leaned forward, his eyes aflame. "Is that a threat?" "It's business," Elias said, with an indifferent shrug. "But I'll consider it a personal favor if you reinstate me into Horizon Global Ventures in a senior capacity. Give me a stake in one of your next big projects. Let me back in the game." Alexander stared at him, a swirl of disgust and pity roiling. "You'd stoop this low?" Elias raised his glass in a mock toast. "Come on. We both know what your father taught us. Success is about leverage. I have leverage now." Alexander stood. "I won't be blackmailed." Elias shrugged, unbothered. "Then you can watch me dismantle your carefully curated world piece by piece. I wonder how the press would react if they learned the real reason behind that carved name. Or if certain financial transactions were put into public record." Alexander's fists clenched, but he forced himself to walk away. Engaging in violence or an open confrontation here would only complicate matters further. As he left the bar, Elias's eyes burned into his back. Outside, the chilly air stung his cheeks, matching the fury that flared in him. Back at Horizon Global Ventures, Alexander convened a small circle of trusted advisors: Miriam Kelly, Charles Deering, and an old ally, Jessica Freeman, the firm's head of compliance. They pored over files detailing Elias's previous projects, searching for any vulnerabilities or potential wrongdoing that Alexander could use as a counter-leverage. An exasperated sigh slipped from Alexander as they found only minimal leads. Elias's misdeeds were well documented from the prior scandal, but he had skillfully wiped most records beyond that. The man was cunning, leaving little behind that could incriminate him now. Cassandra, too, joined the meetings for the first time since the miscarriage. She offered a fresh perspective, though her role was mostly supportive. Alexander felt a glimmer of their old partnership, the synergy that had once made them unstoppable. Late one evening, while scanning the older architectural plans for the Haven complex, Cassandra found a cryptic note scrawled in the margins, a note referencing a specialized vault in the sub-basement designed for data storage, one that Elias had insisted on implementing when he was still with the company. "This sub-basement vault," she said, pushing the plan toward Alexander. "Do you remember authorizing it?" He furrowed his brow, scanning the document. "Not specifically. Elias was heading security protocols back then. He might have snuck it into the design." Charles leaned in, adjusting his reading glasses. "I recall some mention of a state-of-the-art data center, but we never used it. The project was scrapped after Elias left. Cassandra tapped her pen on the blueprint. If Elias had free rein to design it, maybe he stored something there, some leverage. Miriam nodded. He might be counting on no one remembering this vault exists. It's possible he's stashed files there that he can threaten to reveal. Alexander stood. We're going down there. Under the cover of night, Alexander, Cassandra. Miriam and Charles slipped into the Haven complex. They made their way to the sub-basement, guided by the dusty blueprint and the flicker of overhead fluorescent lights. Occasionally, a distant hum of machinery echoed through the concrete corridors. At the far end of a deserted hallway, they found the entrance to the vault, a nondescript metal door with an electronic keypad. Miriam produced a small hacking tool, courtesy of their IT department. She set to work, sweat beading on her forehead, until a faint click announced success. Inside, they discovered a chamber lined with racks meant for servers that never arrived. The air was musty thick with disuse. It took them a while to find anything unusual until Cassandra noticed a steel cabinet in a corner. It was locked, but with a traditional padlock instead of advanced electronics. Charles pried it open with a crowbar. Inside sat a single external hard drive labeled HGV Archives. Next to it lay a dusty stack of documents. Their hearts pounded in unison. Alexander carefully lifted the drive. This must be Elias's stash. He rummaged through the papers, spotting spreadsheets, old memos, and references to questionable deals. Some were legitimate business records, others had confidential stamped across them in thick red letters. The final sheet in the pile drew his eye a ledger listing large sums of money, moving between shell companies, including suspicious references to a Delphi Holdings, a name Alexander had never encountered. They exchanged wary glances, suspecting that Elias had compiled these documents to blackmail the Haven family or any business partners. The question was, who was the real target? Miriam frowned. He might have documented wrongdoing in the Haven Empire, possibly your father's older deals, maybe your father's or your grandfather's, or he might have forged some parts to create false accusations. Either way, it's a time bomb. Cassandra brushed her fingers over the ledger. Could it be tied to your father's secret expansions overseas? I always found it strange how hush-hush Gordon was about certain properties in Europe and Asia. Alexander looked grim. This is more extensive than I imagined. My father might have skeletons buried in places I never knew existed. Charles cleared his throat. We should get these files analyzed, sort out what's real. If some of these are legitimate records, your father could face legal trouble. A wave of fatigue washed over Alexander. Elias had set a trap. Possibly Gordon was complicit in questionable dealings. If so, exposing this could shatter the entire Haven Foundation. But burying the truth would only empower Elias's blackmail attempts. After carefully photographing the documents, they left the vault, locking it behind them. Each step up the sub-basement stairs felt heavier. Alexander's mind raced with potential scenarios, from criminal investigations to media firestorms. But overshadowing all of it was the name Adrian. How the memory of his unborn son had been twisted into the crowbar that pried open these hidden secrets. The next morning, Alexander summoned Gordon to his estate, producing the files and confronting him directly. In Cassandra's presence, the older man examined the documents without betraying much emotion. Then he looked up, eyes icy. Elias was always a snake, he said simply. And you've proven yourself naive for letting him collect these. Alexander's voice shook with outrage. Don't deflect. These deals offshore shell companies, questionable partnerships. This is bigger than Elias. Did you sign off on all this? Gordon's jaw tightened. I did what had to be done to keep our family's fortune intact. Do you have any idea the lengths I went to ensure the Havens remained powerful? We live in a harsh world, Alexander. Sometimes that means forging alliances and sealing deals in ways that aren't publicly palatable. Cassandra's hand flew to her mouth. That's your justification for money laundering bribery. Whatever else is in those documents, Gordon slammed his fist on the table. Do not judge me. Everything I did was for the family. I built an empire for you, Alexander. And here you are, unraveling it all because some ungrateful friend decided to toss around petty threats. Alexander inhaled sharply. Petty threats. He carved Adrian's name on our building to torment us. Don't you understand what this means to Cassandra and me? Gordon's gaze flicked toward Cassandra, momentarily softening. I'm sorry about your child. Truly. But from a business standpoint, Alexander cut him off. Stop. You can't reduce everything to business. This is our family. A tension-soaked silence stretched. Eventually, Cassandra intervened. We need to decide what to do with Elias and with these files. If the media gets hold of this, your entire legacy is at risk. Gordon's lips thinned. Offer him what he wants within reason, and bury this. The Haven name must remain unscathed. Alexander bristled. No. I'm done paying for blackmail. We need to handle this differently. Then handle it, Gordon said, rising from his seat. But don't expect me to take the blame if you fail. He left in a swirl of expensive cologne and bitterness. Alexander clenched his jaw. Cassandra placed a tentative hand on his shoulder. We'll figure it out, she said. But even as she spoke, fear tinged her voice. Days passed, and the pressure mounted. Alexander and Cassandra moved through the estate like ghosts, each lost in a storm of thoughts. Cassandra tried to break the silence more than once, but Alexander was too consumed with forging a strategy to defeat Elias without letting the blackmail files go public. One evening, as a cold rain battered the windows, Cassandra found Alexander in the study, staring at old family photos. He fixated on one of them, a shot of him and Cassandra in front of the nursery, just after she announced she was pregnant, both beaming with unrestrained joy. It felt like a lifetime ago. She sat beside him, sliding an arm around his shoulders. For the first time in weeks, he leaned into her warmth, letting out a shaky breath. I keep trying to hold everything together, he whispered, voice hoarse. But maybe it's time to let it fall apart, so we can rebuild honestly. Cassandra hesitated, her fingers stroking his hair. What do you mean? I mean, maybe we come clean. Let the authorities see those documents, see if there's wrongdoing, and if it implicates my father, so be it. I can't keep living in this twisted circle of blackmail and secrets. A tear escaped Cassandra's eye. That's a huge risk, Alec. It could destroy the Haven name. He swallowed. Our child was destroyed by secrets, too. I never told you how I truly felt after we lost Adrian, how broken I was. I tried to bury it, and it only caused more pain. I don't want to bury anything anymore. Cassandra's tears flowed freely. She cupped his cheeks, searching his gaze. I've hated you for wiping out Adrian's name, for ignoring my grief. But part of me knew you were doing it out of your own heartbreak. I just couldn't face it. Maybe I needed to hate someone. Alexander held her close. I'm sorry. Truly. I wish I could redo it all, but this is our only chance to make something right. If I have to risk the Haven name for it, I will." They held each other for a long time in silence, the patter of rain mixing with the gentle hum of their quiet sobs. Bolstered by Cassandra's support, Alexander arranged a meeting with an attorney experienced in corporate wrongdoing and whistleblowing cases. Cassandra insisted on joining, placing her own name on the line if it meant forging a path toward honesty. The attorney, Janet Huang, listened intently as they recounted the story. Elias's blackmail, the suspicious documents, Gordon's potential involvement. Janet tapped her pen on a legal pad, her brow furrowed. "You could absolutely go to the authorities with this," Janet said. "But the repercussions will be swift. If your father is named, the press will devour the scandal. Your business empire could face asset freezes, investor pullouts. Worst case, you might be forced out of Horizon altogether." Alexander nodded grimly. "We understand. But if we let Elias hold this over us, we'll never be free." Janet leaned forward, eyes intense. "There is another approach. We can compile the documents properly, highlight any legitimate wrongdoing, and strike a deal with the authorities, cooperate fully in exchange for leniency, especially if you personally had no knowledge or involvement. Then you use that official stance to face Elias. If he tries to leak anything else, it'll either be old news or overshadowed by your proactive cooperation." Cassandra looked at Alexander, and he squeezed her hand. "Let's do it," he said. A week later, everything unfolded in a maelstrom. Alexander handed over the stash of documents to federal investigators. Gordon, upon learning of his son's plan, erupted in fury, threatening to disown Alexander and disclaim him from the Haven fortune. In a heated exchange, Alexander retorted that no legacy was worth sacrificing integrity. The media storm was immediate. Headlines blared, "Haven Empire under investigation." Stock prices wobbled. Enemies came out of the woodwork, piling on claims and rumors. Some of the documents did implicate Gordon in shady overseas dealings, though the extent of criminal liability remained uncertain. Elias, furious that Alexander had circumvented his blackmail, attempted to leak additional documents, but they were dismissed as either already in possession of investigators or irrelevant. The worst damage fell on Gordon's personal reputation. Alexander stood poised to lose a sizable chunk of the family wealth, but ironically his public image remained relatively unscathed. In some corners, he was hailed as a man who chose the moral high ground. Cassandra stood by him, offering unwavering support through the barrage of cameras and microphones. In the midst of chaos, they found themselves drawing closer, forging a new intimacy shaped by shared adversity and honesty. Amid the swirling fallout, Alexander decided to rectify his greatest regret. While Cassandra was away at a charity event, he snuck into the old nursery. Since the day he painted over the walls, the room had remained cold, empty, and lifeless. He reopened the sealed cans of paint, carefully mixing soft blues and greys, the same palette they had originally chosen. Next, with trembling hands, he painted the name Adrian in delicate lettering on the wall above where the crib once stood. He added small embellishments, little stars, a crescent moon evoking the night sky they had once envisioned for their child's peaceful dreams. When Cassandra returned that evening, she found him in the nursery, paintbrush in hand, tears slipping down his cheeks. He gestured silently to the wall. She pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes filling with tears. She joined him, picking up a brush and adding her own finishing touches. They worked side by side, recreating what had been lost. Forging a small sanctuary, not for a living child, but for a memory that would always hold a corner of their hearts. Afterward, they slumped together on the floor, leaning against the freshly painted wall. For the first time, the name Adrian brought them solace instead of sorrow. Several months later, the investigations concluded. Gordon faced penalties, steep fines, partial relinquishment of overseas assets, and a forced retirement from the board of Horizon Global Ventures. Alexander took the reins fully, albeit under the scrutiny of new compliance measures. The company survived battered but intact. For many employees, Alexander's willingness to confront corruption ignited a renewed faith in Horizon's future. Elias vanished from Boston's high society rumors, swirling that he fled the country. With no leverage left, his name faded into the background. Few missed him. During a quiet afternoon, Alexander and Cassandra strolled hand in hand through the Haven Complex Plaza. They paused at the stone panel near the entrance where Adrian had once been etched. A faint outline of the letters was still visible even after professional repairs. Instead of resentment, Alexander felt a gentle pang of remembrance. Cassandra rested her head on his shoulder. It's strange how it all turned out. Adrian's name brought so much conflict, but in the end, it brought us back together. Alexander nodded softly, kissing her temple. It's not the way I would have chosen, but I guess fate finds odd ways to guide us. She smiled through lingering sadness. I've been thinking a lot about the future, about maybe trying for another child one day. The corners of Alexander's mouth lifted. I'd like that, he whispered. And he knew, despite the scars, they were stronger than before. That evening they returned to the estate. Outside the nursery, Cassandra paused, placing her palm on the fresh paint. They didn't need to erase Adrian's memory anymore. Love and acceptance had replaced denial and guilt. In time, they would fill that house with laughter, and maybe, just maybe, Adrian's name would become a whisper of hope rather than a cry of loss. And there you have it, a tale of ambition and heartbreak, where a single etched name tore through family secrets and forced a reckoning that no one saw coming. In the end, Alexander and Cassandra found the courage to face the ghosts that haunted them, to stand up against blackmail, and to carve a new path defined not by hidden deals or erased memories, but by honesty and love. If this story resonated with you, reminding you that every challenge can be an opportunity to rediscover what truly matters, then help us share that message. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that delve into the heart of human drama tales of triumph, tragedy, and the unbreakable bonds that hold us together. Thank you for being part of this journey. We'll see you in the next story.